What's up again, everybody? Well, with the close of the ProQuest season, it's high time we jump into the next skirmish season because it's actually starting next week. ProQuest is now behind us. We're moving into some classic constructed stuff as far as the callings are concerned, but Blitz is always here, and Skirmish Season 4 has some really cool prizes up for grabs. So let's talk about 5 of perhaps the most powerful Blitz heroes in the new EVERFEST meta. EVERFEST came out and really changed the game as far as Blitz is concerned, and I think we need to talk about some of these heroes that are now just very, very cool, very, very powerful, and that you might see a lot going forward. A couple of notable exclusions on this list. I'm not including Ira on this list. Yes, I do think Ira is still very powerful, and also just going to be played a lot because it's an easy deck to pick up, and she's fantastic for that. But she's not on this list because I think there are actually 5 perhaps more powerful decks than her, or at least toe-to-toe with her, so I figured we'd talk about those. Also, I didn't talk about Dorinthia in this list. I don't have her on the list, but you can definitely still play Dorinthia, so keep those in the back of the mind. But these 5, I don't want to call them new heroes because they're not. They're heroes in the game, but they're perhaps new to the top tiers of Blitz, and they are all worth talking about, including our first one, Viscera. Viscera is a fantastic hero, has been since the dawn of Arcane Rising when I picked him up. He was, believe it or not, he was actually the young hero promo that I chose to pick up when I bought my first edition Arcane Rising box. Right as the pandemic was setting in and quarantine was going down and lockdowns were happening, I picked up a Rainbow Foil Young Viscera, and I've been like super into Viscera ever since. I really like him. And weirdly enough, like I played perhaps more Viscera OTK than anything in any Blitz season ever. And he has gotten so much support since then, when I thought he was a dark horse sort of meta deck where you could just play him into Ira and just have a really good matchup because it was like, oh cool, I'm just going to OTK you and you have nothing to do against that. But there were tough matchups, like just because you were playing an OTK deck, and anything that burns you on an OTK deck, you just died to. But now, with EVERFEST and a lot of the cards that came from EVERFEST, and also with Monarch and the release of Sonata Arcanix, Viscera has so much game as far as aggro is concerned. He can just push so much different forms of damage. It's like it's literally what you would think Viscera would do when he was released, is create a bunch of Runechant tokens and also push those Runechant tokens with push the point attacks, like 4 attacks across that break point. He does that so well now with Sonata, and with of course Mavrian Skies from Crucible of War is now just at the 4, and you have all these great things like Revel and Runeblood now that he can take advantage of and really push extra damage with, and of course Rosetta Thorn is fantastic. All of those have made Viscera specifically so much better. And yes, of course, we could talk about Briar being good, but I think like Chain is also pretty good overall. All of them pale in comparison to what I think Viscera can do now in Blitz. Yes, you can still play OTK Viscera and sort of build up Runechants and then, pop your Skeleton. I think now you just run a solid aggro list into just about every matchup, and you have good matchups across the board. Viscera is a very, very strong hero in Blitz. That is my stance. I'm curious if you will go out and play Blitz, and if you can prove me right or prove me wrong as far as Viscera is concerned, because I think he's going to do well going forward, as will Benji the Piercing Wind. Look, it's no secret that Benji's specialization is nuts. The specialization that was given to Benji, Spring Tidings, which I chose to use as the background, as you can see, Spring Tidings is a game winner. It is so powerful, it fundamentally changes the way that other classes play into Benji. When Benji sits down at the table across from you, you have to side in different equipment across the board. Doesn't matter what hero you're playing, you're probably having to consider your equipment blocks. If you're playing a Guardian, you are very much changing the way that you play, and your game plan, your priorities, when you play against Benji, because if you can stop Spring Tidings, then you can probably win the game. If you can't stop Spring Tidings, then you always lose the game. That's generally the thing with Benji now. Benji is very, very powerful if you are unable to stop Spring Tidings, which again vaults itself. Benji vaults himself forward into the forefront of this metagame, because there are heroes that just can't deal with the block on Spring Tidings. They just can't do it. They don't have equipments that block well, and so they have to side in equipment that block into that perhaps, or they don't have defense reactions, and then they obviously can't sideboard because Blitz doesn't have a sideboard in this scenario. And so all of this to say, because Benji can just play this OTK strategy of like, I just get a Spring Tidings and then I destroy the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx to go and get another Spring Tidings and blow you out on a turn with unblockable attacks, your opponents have to really consider both who they're playing, just fundamentally, what deck you're bringing to whatever tournament you're going to, and then how they're playing against Benji. It's one of those decks that sits down and says, you have to stop me. And that is fundamentally very powerful in a format that is so fast like Blitz is. So I think Benji will do very well going forward. And I will also say this, I think there's going to be a lot of people playing Benji in general because of the raw power level at first glance. And there will be people that don't necessarily play it well. And I'm not saying I do, I'm just saying that if you play well into Benji, or if you know exactly what you want to do into Benji, you could find some success playing in this matchup. But I will tell you this, I think there are going to be people that really grind out the Benji sort of just deck in general and optimize it and figure out some very, very good play lines and do very well with Benji, as I do think with a lot of these heroes. One of the things that I think will become a meta call and become very good in general, and technically Oldhim was actually becoming very good in the previous skirmish season, but Oldhim I think is a fantastic matchup into Benji, because again, we're talking about a deck that could be a just like a large meta percentage, and Oldhim in a lot of ways can counter Benji, both allowing you to run multiple 2-block equipment, a shield that could conceivably help you block that same, like win the game if you don't block Spring Tidings line, and then a defense reaction that also allows you to possibly stop 2 damage. And by the way, Benji is all about 1 and 2 damage chunks going through unblocked. Oldhim just has a fantastic feeling matchup on paper into Benji, and I think that is going to be the one, maybe not one of the several, I'll put it that way, one of the several possible answers to Benji overall. I don't necessarily think Benji absolutely destroys the board, destroys the field, because I think there are things like Oldhim that can just say, no, you know what, I'm just going to block with all my equipment. I am just going to, defense react with Earth. And then when you don't have a very good turn, I'm just going to hit you in the face for 10 and then continue about my business. Maybe you even just swing the hammer for 4 and threaten a frostbite on top of that. I think Oldhim is well positioned in a meta. I think you also have to be very careful if you're choosing to play Oldhim, to know how your deck plays and to know your general idea of play, and then match up specific ideas as well, because if you don't play quickly enough as Oldhim, you're going to go to time. Generally, he's just going to be blocking and defending and being very creative with the way that he chooses to mitigate damage when you pitch for the defense reaction, when you choose to block with a shield, when you choose to block with your equipment, if you choose to run some gadget cards that help your equipment like Nerves of Steel. Things like this are what you have to know if you want to play Oldhim, and especially at a high level. And by the way, Flesh and Blood and Legend Story Studios are trying to push Blitz in a way that I thought they would back when they announced Blitz, based on the way that they worded that. I made a video like a year and a half ago, whenever Blitz came out, and I was like, they say that this isn't going to be a premier format, and I'm not so sure I buy that, because I think this is a fantastic format. And now we have Blitz decks, we have Blitz Challenger, what are they called? Classic Battle decks coming out, and we've run 4 seasons of skirmishes. I think it's a fantastic format, and obviously one of the premier formats, of course. And Oldhim here is one of those decks that if you learn how to play it in this format can be just very dominating. Very, very dominating in a lot of ways. Pun intended. We're down to 2 heroes, and we're down to my personal favorite and one that I will be playing a lot in Blitz, and that's Kano. Kano got way better, in my opinion. I don't know. Some people are probably going to disagree with that. I think Kano got way better, and I think that the case is made by the single printing of Aether Wildfire that Kano is a lot better in general. In Blitz, I think the fact that you can have just a blowout turn at any moment makes your opponents, again, just like with Spring Tidings and Benji, fundamentally have to play around you differently. And I've experienced this playing as Kano in Blitz multiple times already, because there's the threat of always just coming in with Aether Wildfire on your opponent's turn from like a quad blue hand and pitching off the top of your deck, finding that and finding like a zap or something like that. Or, you know, God forbid you find that plus like, oh, I don't know, a Forked Lightning and then something like a Blazing Aether, a la the, you know, turn 0 combo that was spreading around after it was pulled off in a ProQuest. Things like that, which I just want to stop and say, yes, I accidentally did that in a game recently, and it's a little easier to pull off in Blitz where the cards are, where the deck is a little smaller. But like things like that can just happen in Blitz a little bit easier. And your opponent has to go, okay, am I just dead if I drop my hand here? And because they have to do that, and because you have the card in the game, I think Kano is very well positioned to continue to be dominant in Blitz. Because again, all he has to do is count to 20. Counting to 20 oftentimes is a lot easier than counting to the 40 that you see in Classic Constructed. So that's why he's been powerful in Blitz. Now, it is no walk in the park to play Kano. It never has been. Deck construction, even just fundamentally on numbers and like ratios and things like that, is tricky. And then, of course, there's always this consideration of, okay, do we play some suboptimal cards in Blitz because we can't sideboard? Like, do we run Scours? Because now Scour doesn't combo off of like a Aether Wildfire because it doesn't get a buff if you don't destroy any of the auras. Do we run Scour just for the possibility of coming in and destroying some auras in a very key moment? Because that's a suboptimal card. So there are these questions you have to ask yourself as a Kano player and a Kano deck builder that I think are going to be answered over the course of this meta. But I do think that Kano is one of the decks to beat in the format and will continue to be one of the decks to beat in the format going forward. But do I think it's the best deck in the format? I'm going to go with no, because my other favorite deck in the format is, in my opinion, the best deck in the format, and that's Kassai, Centauri Sellsword. I think, you know, here's the saddest thing about this entire Kassai thing, is that because Kassai has a subtitle, Centauri Sellsword, it tells us we're never going to see Kassai, like, grown. And maybe that's wrong, actually. Maybe I shouldn't make that assumption, because we do see in the Classic Battles starter set, we see a Dorinthia, and she's got a different subtitle. So maybe we do see a Kassai. Maybe we see an adult Kassai coming in, like, in the upcoming set, and maybe it's like we go to Volcor and adult Kassai is one of the heroes. Oh man, I'm getting excited, because that would be so sick. Nevertheless, Kassai Centauri Sellsword in Blitz is a boogeyman now. She is so good just because she has access to a specialization card. In fact, the specialization card, Blood on Her Hands, is so good that it took away, well, I don't want to say that, it didn't take it away, but myself and a few other people have started to just straight up cut the payoff card that used to be Kassai's payoff card, and that was Cash In, from her deck. Cash In was the card that you were sort of aiming to get so that you could draw extra cards and then have like a slightly larger turn. At this point, you don't even really want Cash In, because it just uses your coppers to draw cards rather than using your coppers to make your swords kill your opponent. And that's basically what you do now. With the inclusion of Blood on Her Hands, with the inclusion of what is the Blade Runner? That's the one. The inclusion of Blade Runner and like In the Swing and the one with her on it, Skirmish. Why did I blank on the Skirmishy card? I'll put it on the screen probably. I don't know. With the inclusion of all of those zero cost cards, Kassai's deck, like in general, shifts how it plays, and it shifts how it pays for itself, because you can still run all the blues that you would need to pay for things, and like attack reactions and things like that. You can run all the blues that you would need to pay for things, but a lot of her cards cost 0, right? You're paying for like Spoils of War in the first swing, right? The first swing of the sword. You're paying for Spoils of War and the first swing of the sword and like Out for Blood. Okay, so you're pitching a blue, you're paying for all of that. If your opponent gives you a Frostbite with like Oldhim, you can still easily kind of dodge around that because she discounts her second sword swing, and the first one's so cheap, you just play it, and then, I don't know, maybe you play a Blade Runner for 1 after that. So you pitch a blue, you pay 2 for the sword attack, Blade Runner, and come in with a hit and run, and then attack with a second sword for free. It's like you just dance around some of those control pieces that are very scary, and not only that, she just pushes 1 billion damage now. She like goes way tall, like crazy tall, and it's not hard to do. So I think Kassai is the deck to beat right now in this format. Now, I don't know if that's going to hold true, or if people are going to innovate or really grind out games and perfect certain lists, but I do think the raw power is there for Kassai, and I definitely think that she is at least one of the 5 decks to beat. So in my opinion, these are the decks you should be watching out for. Of course, and this is the interesting thing about Blitz. I think Blitz actually is way more varied right now than it ever has been, thanks to the release of EVERFEST. And these 5 decks that I've talked about are just 5 of many that are still to be explored in their new states. Like Kaio, for example, is perhaps like a high roll Kaio possible in this format? Can it actually just start stealing games in a meta where you would think that all these crazy things could happen, and you just come in with Kaio and you block a bunch and swing the like the weapon a few times, and then find your pieces, find ready to roll, and then just roll and blow your opponent up? It's very possible. So I want to know your thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are about these decks in a comment below. Which one do you think is going to be the most powerful? Do you think it's going to be Kassai? Let me know down there. And if you enjoyed this video or you learned something from it, feel free to do the thing where a number goes to a number. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.